Dr. Marcus Chen had never expected to find himself in the middle of an alien city during what looked like a festival gone wrong. The Veltar homeworld of Ketha Prime was supposed to be peaceful, a place where he could conduct his xenobiology research without worrying about anything more dangerous than accidentally offending local customs. The tall, graceful aliens with their silver skin and large dark eyes had welcomed him warmly 3 months ago, eager to share their knowledge with the newest member species of the Galactic Council. Today, however, something was very different. In the grand plaza of their capital city, Marcus had been walking through the market district, his tablet in hand as he recorded notes about Veltar social behavior. The aliens moved with a fluid grace that reminded him of dancers, their long limbs carrying them in smooth glides across the polished stone streets. Their voices created a musical humming that filled the air like a gentle symphony. Everything about their society spoke of peace and harmony. That harmony shattered in an instant. A commotion erupted near the center of the plaza, where a group of Veltar in ornate clothing had been moving through the crowd. Marcus looked up from his tablet to see figures in dark clothing suddenly appearing from various directions, moving with purpose toward the ornate group. These new arrivals moved differently from the peaceful Veltar he had grown accustomed to. Their movements were sharp and deliberate, and something metallic glinted in their hands. The crowd began to scatter, their musical humming turning into discordant sounds of fear. Marcus found himself pushed and jostled as Veltar fled in all directions, their graceful movements becoming frantic and clumsy in their panic. He struggled to maintain his footing as bodies pressed against him from all sides. Through the chaos, Marcus saw something that made his heart skip. A small figure had broken away from the ornate group at the center of the disturbance. It was clearly a child, much smaller than the adult Veltar around her, with the same silver skin but moving with the uncoordinated urgency that universal marks the young of any species when they are terrified. The child was running directly toward him, and behind her the dark-clothed figures were giving chase. Marcus could see weapons in their hands now, devices that hummed with energy and cast an ominous blue glow. Whatever was happening, it was clear that this small being was in mortal danger. Marcus did not think. He simply acted on an instinct that ran deeper than rational thought. As the child reached him, stumbling and clearly exhausted from her desperate flight, he stepped forward and spread his arms wide. The little Veltar collided with his legs and immediately wrapped her thin arms around them, her whole body shaking with fear. The pursuing assassins came to an abrupt halt just 5 meters away from Marcus and the child. Their weapons, which had been raised and ready to fire, slowly lowered as they stared at him with what looked like complete bewilderment. Marcus stared back, his own heart racing, but he kept his arms spread wide and his body positioned between the child and her would-be killers. Something strange was happening. The assassins were not just hesitating, they looked genuinely confused, as if they had suddenly forgotten what they were supposed to be doing. One of them raised his weapon again, then lowered it once more, his large dark eyes blinking rapidly as he stared at Marcus. But it was not just the assassins who had stopped. Marcus became aware that the entire plaza had fallen silent. The fleeing crowd had come to a standstill, every single Veltar in sight standing perfectly still and staring at him. Even the royal guards who had been pursuing the assassins had frozen in place, their own weapons hanging uselessly at their sides. The silence stretched on, broken only by the rapid breathing of the small child clinging to Marcus's legs and the distant hum of the city's machinery. Hundreds of pairs of large dark eyes were fixed on him, with an intensity that made his skin crawl. It was as if every Veltar in the plaza had suddenly forgotten how to move. Marcus cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the strange quiet. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, his voice carrying further than it should have in the stillness. "The child is safe now." At the sound of his voice, several of the nearest Veltar took an involuntary step backward. The motion seemed to break, whatever spell had held them, and gradually the crowd began to move again, but with a caution that had not been there before. They kept their distance from Marcus and the child, forming a wide circle around them as if afraid to come too close. The assassins looked around in apparent confusion, then at each other, then back at Marcus. One of them tried to take a step forward, but his movement was jerky and uncertain, as if he was fighting against his own body. After a moment, they seemed to give up entirely, holstering their weapons and melting back into the crowd with the same swift efficiency with which they had appeared. The royal guards were the next to recover, though their movements remained cautious and uncertain. They approached slowly, their weapons lowered but not put away. Marcus noticed that they kept their eyes fixed on him rather than looking directly at where he stood, as if they could not quite bear to focus on him completely. "Human Marcus," one of the guards called out, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of Veltar speech, but with an undertone Marcus had never heard before. It sounded almost like fear. "Please remain still. Do not make sudden movements." Marcus found the request puzzling, since he had not been planning to make any sudden movements anyway. The child was still clinging to his legs, and he could feel her small body beginning to relax slightly as the immediate danger passed. He reached down slowly and gently patted her head, trying to offer what comfort he could. The gesture caused another ripple of reaction through the watching crowd. Several Veltar took another step back, and Marcus heard a low humming sound that he had learned indicated distress or confusion among their species. "I am still," Marcus said calmly. "The child seems unhurt, but she is frightened. Should I move away from her so you can take her to safety?" "No." The response came not from the guards, but from a new voice, one that carried the unmistakable tone of authority. Marcus turned his head carefully to see a group of Veltar in even more elaborate clothing approaching. At their head was a tall female whose silver skin bore intricate markings that Marcus recognized as indicators of high social status. This newcomer moved with more confidence than the others, though Marcus noticed that she too kept a respectful distance. "Do not move away from Kira," she continued, her voice tight with what sounded like barely controlled emotion. "She is safe where she is." "Kira?" Marcus looked down at the small child, who was now looking up at him with eyes that seemed impossibly large even by Veltar standards. "Is that your name, little one?" The child nodded and pressed herself closer to his legs. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the same musical quality as the adults of her species. "You are not afraid," she said, the words more statement than question. Marcus smiled down at her. "Should I be afraid?" "Everyone else is," Kira replied with the straightforward honesty that seemed to be universal among children regardless of species. "They cannot move when you are protecting me. Why are you different?" It was a good question, and Marcus found himself without a good answer. He looked up at the elaborate female who was clearly someone important, possibly Kira's mother based on the resemblance and the obvious concern in her voice. "I am afraid I do not understand what is happening here," he admitted. "Could someone explain why everyone seems so frightened?" "The child is safe now." The important female exchanged glances with her companions, and Marcus caught what looked like surprise in their expressions. After a long moment, she spoke again. "You truly do not know," she said, and it was not a question. "Come then, Dr. Marcus Chen of Earth. There are things you must learn about your species and mine, things that will change how you see yourself and how the galaxy sees humanity." As she spoke these words, Marcus felt the small child's grip on his legs tighten once more, and he found himself wondering what exactly he had stumbled into by simply doing what felt right. The royal palace of the Veltar was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls seemed to flow like water frozen in time, their surface shimmering with colors that shifted as he walked past. The ceiling arched impossibly high above them, decorated with what looked like constellations that moved slowly across the surface in patterns that hurt his eyes to follow for too long. Little Kira had not let go of his hand since they left the plaza. She walked beside him with the quiet determination of a child who had decided that this strange alien was her source of safety in a world that had suddenly become dangerous. Marcus found her trust both touching and concerning, especially given how everyone else seemed to react to his presence. The important female, who had introduced herself as Princess Zara Thel during the walk to the palace, moved ahead of them, with her guards. Marcus noticed that the guards maintained a careful distance from him, never getting closer than about 3 meters. They moved in a way that reminded him of his old dog back on Earth when it encountered something it could not understand, alert but ready to flee at any moment. Dr. Chen, Princess Zarathel said as they entered a large chamber filled with floating displays and complex equipment. Please sit wherever you feel comfortable. Kira, you may stay close to him if you wish. Marcus settled into what looked like a chair, though it adjusted itself to his body in ways that Earth furniture definitely did not. Kira immediately climbed up beside him, curling up against his side with the casual affection that children showed to adults they trusted completely. The princess took a position across the room, and Marcus noticed that she chose a spot that kept significant distance between them. Several other Veltar entered the chamber, their clothing marking them as scholars or scientists of some kind. They carried various devices and moved with the careful precision of people conducting an important experiment. Before we begin, Princess Zarathel said, I must ask you something that may sound strange. Have you noticed anything unusual about how my people react to humans? Marcus thought about it carefully. I have been on your world for 3 months and most Veltar have been very welcoming. Today was the first time I have seen anything like what happened in the plaza. Everyone seemed to freeze when I protected Kira. Not just freeze, one of the scientists said, his voice carrying a note of amazement. Complete motor suppression, involuntary stress response activation, classic predator recognition syndrome. Marcus frowned. I am sorry, but I do not understand. Predator recognition syndrome? Princess Zarathel gestured to the scientists who began activating their floating displays. Images appeared in the air between them, 3-dimensional projections that showed various creatures from what Marcus assumed was Veltar evolutionary history. Dr. Chen, the princess said, what I am about to tell you has been classified information until today. Our species evolved as prey animals on a world where we were hunted by apex predators called the Keth Mori. The displays shifted to show creatures that made Marcus's skin crawl. They were roughly humanoid in shape, but moved with a fluid, deadly grace that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary refinement toward the perfect killing machine. Their eyes faced forward like those of Earth predators, and their limbs were long and powerful. The Keth Mori hunted in packs, the princess continued. They were intelligent, patient, and absolutely ruthless. They would track their prey for days, using sophisticated tactics to separate individuals from the safety of the group. Our ancestors survived by developing an instant freeze response when confronted by a Keth Mori. Sometimes, staying perfectly still was the difference between life and death. Marcus studied the images, beginning to understand what she was leading up to. But these creatures are extinct, correct? They have been gone for over 2 million years, another scientist confirmed. But the genetic memory remains burned into our DNA. The response is so deeply embedded that it overrides conscious thought when triggered. And I triggered it, Marcus said quietly. More than triggered it, Princess Zarathel replied. Dr. Chen, when our scientists first studied humans before your species joined the Galactic Council, they noted certain similarities to the Keth Mori. Forward-facing eyes, persistence hunting adaptations, pack coordination instincts. But we believed these were superficial resemblances. The displays changed again, now showing side-by-side comparisons. Marcus felt a chill as he saw images of ancient Keth Mori next to anatomical diagrams of humans. The similarities were undeniable. We were wrong, the princess said. Humans do not just resemble the Keth Mori. In terms of predator characteristics, you have exceeded them in every measurable way. One of the scientists stepped forward, though he maintained his careful distance. Dr. Chen, may I ask you to describe what went through your mind when you saw Kira being chased? Marcus thought back to those crucial seconds in the plaza. I saw a child in danger. I did not think about it. I just moved to protect her. It seemed like the natural thing to do. Natural, the scientist repeated, making notes on a floating display. Instinctive protective behavior toward young of other species. Classic apex predator trait, but taken to an extreme we have never observed. I do not understand, Marcus said. How is protecting children an extreme trait? Princess Zarathel leaned forward slightly, though she still maintained her distance. Dr. Chen, the Keth Mori would protect their own young, but they showed no mercy to the young of their prey species. In fact, they often targeted the young deliberately because they were easier to catch. But humans, another scientist added, show protective instincts toward the young of completely different species, alien children. This behavior makes no evolutionary sense from a survival standpoint, yet it appears to be universal among your people. Marcus looked down at Kira, who had fallen asleep against his side during the conversation. Her small hand was still gripped tightly around one of his fingers. "It just feels right," he said simply. That response, Princess Zarathel said softly, that immediate, unthinking protective instinct toward a child of a different species triggered something in every Veltar who witnessed it. Our genetic programming told us we were seeing the ultimate predator, but that same predator was protecting rather than hunting. It created a feedback loop in our nervous systems. Is that why everyone froze? Not just froze. Dr. Chen, for a period of approximately 47 seconds, every Veltar within 200 meters of you experienced complete motor function suppression. We literally could not move. Our higher brain functions were overwhelmed by genetic programming that was both screaming danger and detecting behaviors that contradicted everything our DNA told us about apex predators. Marcus absorbed this information slowly. So when I step in to protect someone, I accidentally activate an ancient fear response in your people. More than fear, the scientist said. Awe, confusion, a complete reorganization of threat assessment protocols. Dr. Chen, you have to understand. We have never encountered a species that triggers our deepest evolutionary fears while simultaneously demonstrating the protective behaviors we associate with the safest possible beings. Your people see me as a monster that acts like a guardian, Marcus said, finally understanding. Exactly. And that contradiction has just created the biggest political crisis in Galactic Council history. Princess Zarathel activated another display, this one showing communications from across the galaxy. Message after message scrolled past, all marked with urgent priority codes. Word of what happened today has already reached the other council worlds, she said. Every species wants to know the same thing. If humans can accidentally paralyze an entire Veltar population center just by acting on protective instincts, what else might your species be capable of? Marcus felt Kira stir against his side, and he gently adjusted his position to make her more comfortable. The simple gesture caused every Veltar in the room to take an involuntary step backward. I am beginning to think, Marcus said quietly, that this is going to be a much bigger problem than anyone realized. Dr. Chen, Princess Zarathel replied, her voice grave. You have no idea how right you are. Marcus woke to the sound of urgent voices outside his guest quarters in the palace. 3 days had passed since the incident in the plaza, and each day had brought new complications. Kira had insisted on sleeping in the room next to his, and the palace staff had accommodated her request despite the obvious nervousness it caused them. The little princess had become his constant companion, following him everywhere with the determination of someone who had found her safe harbor in a storm. She seemed completely unaffected by the chaos her presence with him was causing throughout the galaxy. To her, Marcus was simply the strange alien who had protected her when everyone else froze, and that was all that mattered. Marcus dressed quickly and opened his door to find Princess Zarathel waiting in the corridor with a group of officials he did not recognize. Their faces carried expressions of barely controlled panic, and several of them stepped backward when he appeared. Dr. Chen, the princess said, her voice tight with stress. We need to talk immediately. The situation has become much worse overnight. They moved to the same chamber where they had spoken before, though this time it was filled with communication equipment and floating displays showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Kira appeared at Marcus's side as if by magic, slipping her small hand into his with the casual possessiveness of a child who had decided he belonged to her. Show him the emergency session recording. Princess Zarathel instructed one of the technicians. A large display activated, showing the interior of what Marcus recognized as the Galactic Council chambers. Representatives from dozens of species filled the vast space, and the noise level indicated heated debate. The camera focused on a tall insectoid being that Marcus knew was Ambassador Vexhai of the Zephyrian Collective. The implications are clear, the ambassador was saying, his translated voice carrying obvious agitation. If humans can accidentally disable an entire Veltar population center simply by behaving naturally, what happens when they decide to act with purpose? What happens when they get angry? The display switched to show another representative, this one from a species Marcus did not recognize. The Veltar claimed this human showed protective instincts toward an alien child. But how do we know this was not a calculated demonstration? How do we know they are not testing their power over us? Because, came a familiar voice, and Marcus saw his own ambassador, Sarah Chen, standing to address the assembly. Dr. Marcus Chen had no knowledge of Veltar evolutionary history when this incident occurred. He acted on pure instinct to protect a child who was in danger. This is documented fact. Instinct, shouted another representative. That makes it worse, not better. If this behavior is instinctual among humans, then every human is a potential weapon against the Veltar. The recording continued for several minutes, showing representative after representative expressing fear, anger, and confusion about humanity's place in the galactic community. Marcus watched with growing dismay as species after species called for immediate restrictions on human movement, human settlement rights, or even human membership in the council entirely. Turn it off, Princess Zarathel said quietly. He has seen enough. Marcus looked down at Kira, who was studying the displays with the intense concentration of a child trying to understand adult problems. Are they talking about you? She asked. Him. Yes, little one. They are afraid of me. That is silly, Kira declared with the absolute certainty that only children could manage. You are not scary. You make the scary things go away. One of the officials in the room shifted nervously. At her words, Marcus noticed that none of them could look directly at him when Kira was close, as if the combination of his presence and his obvious protective relationship with the child created some kind of cognitive overload for them. Dr. Chen, Princess, Zarathel said, there is something else you need to know. The assassination attempt against Kira was not random. We have discovered that it was part of a larger conspiracy involving several extremist factions from different worlds. Extremist factions? Groups that have always opposed the Veltar membership in the council. They saw our freeze response to humans as proof that we are too weak to deserve our position. They intended to eliminate Kira as a symbol of that weakness. Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest. They tried to kill a child to make a political point. Every Veltar in the room took an involuntary step backward. Marcus realized that his emotional state was somehow affecting their response to him, making their freeze reaction even stronger. What you just felt, Princess Zarathel said carefully. That protective anger, every Veltar in this room experienced it as a threat response more intense than anything our species has ever recorded. Dr. Chen, when you become angry on behalf of someone you are protecting, our genetic programming interprets it as a hunting predator preparing to attack. Marcus took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. As he did, he noticed the tension in the room decrease slightly. I am sorry. I did not mean to frighten anyone. You did not frighten us, one of the scientists said. You activated every single survival instinct we possess simultaneously. The difference is important. Dr. Chen, Princess Zarathel continued, the extremist groups are not giving up. They see the galactic reaction to your abilities as an opportunity. They are spreading rumors that humans are preparing to use their effect on us as a weapon. They claim that your protection of Kira was a demonstration of power, not genuine care. That is ridiculous. Is it? The question came from a new voice. Marcus turned to see an elderly Veltar entering the chamber, his silver skin bearing the deep markings of extreme age and wisdom. Dr. Chen, I am High Counselor Mordeth. May I ask you a question? Of course. If someone threatened Princess Kira while you were present, what would you do? Marcus looked down at the small child who was watching the conversation with bright, intelligent eyes. The answer came without hesitation. I would stop them. And if they persisted, I would stop them permanently. The High Counselor nodded, slowly. And there, Dr. Chen, is why half the galaxy is terrified of your species. You have just calmly stated that you would kill to protect a child that is not even your own species. Meanwhile, every Veltar in this room is experiencing a genetic response that tells them you have the capability to do exactly that. Marcus began to understand the scope of the problem. So when I express protective instincts, your people simultaneously recognize me as both guardian and ultimate threat. Precisely. And that contradiction is tearing our society apart. Half of our parliament wants to declare humanity our closest allies. The other half wants to demand your immediate removal from council space. What about the other species? Princess Zarathel activated another display, showing current political positions across the galaxy. The Zephyrians are calling for immediate human quarantine. The Crystalline Collective wants to study your species as potential weapons. The nomadic fleets are offering to hire humans as protection specialists. And 17 different minor species have requested immediate human presence in their space as deterrence against their enemies. In other words, the High Counselor said, your mere existence has destabilized galactic politics in ways we are only beginning to understand. A new alarm began sounding throughout the palace. Princess Zarathel quickly activated a communication channel, and Marcus heard urgent reports coming in from around the capital city. Your Highness, came a panicked voice. There are riots breaking out in the lower districts. Pro-human and anti-human factions are clashing in the streets. The city guard is requesting permission to use force to restore order. Denied, the princess said immediately. Any use of force will only make things worse. She turned to Marcus, with an expression of desperation. Dr. Chen, I am afraid we are running out of time. The extremists are using the galactic reaction to turn our own people against each other. Marcus felt Kira's hand tighten in his as the sound of distant shouting reached them through the palace walls. What can I do to help? That, said High Counselor Mordeth, is exactly what we need to figure out. And we need to figure it out before someone gets killed in your name. The Galactic Council had made their decision. Marcus stood in the center of the ancient Veltar sacred proving grounds, a massive arena carved from living stone that had tested warriors for thousands of years. The morning sun cast long shadows across the circular space, and the silence was broken only by the sound of his own breathing. The test was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. Marcus had to survive for 24 hours in the proving grounds with 100 of the finest Veltar warriors, without causing harm to any of them. The council wanted proof that humans could coexist with species they accidentally paralyzed, or they wanted evidence that humanity was too dangerous to remain in galactic society. The stakes could not be higher. Princess Zarathel had explained the morning before that failure would result in humanity's immediate expulsion from council space and the establishment of a permanent quarantine around Earth. Success, however, might create possibilities that no one had yet imagined. Kira had cried when she learned she could not accompany him into the arena. She had become so attached to Marcus over the past week that separation caused her genuine distress. The palace staff had been forced to assign 3 different caretakers to keep her occupied, while Marcus prepared for the trial. Remember, Dr. Chen, Princess Zarathel had said during their final briefing, these are our greatest warriors. They have trained their entire lives to overcome fear and act in combat, but none of them have ever tried to function while experiencing the freeze. Response to an apex predator. Now, as Marcus heard the great doors of the arena beginning to open, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake by agreeing to this test. The sound of armored feet echoed across the stone as the Veltar warriors entered the proving grounds. They moved in perfect formation, their silver armor gleaming in the sunlight. Each warrior carried weapons that hummed with energy, and their movements showed the fluid precision of beings who had spent decades perfecting the art of combat. But as soon as they caught sight of Marcus standing in the center of the arena, their formation began to waver. The lead warrior, a tall female with scars marking her armor, came within 20 meters of Marcus before stopping completely. Her weapon lowered involuntarily, and Marcus could see the confusion in her large dark eyes as her conscious mind fought against genetic programming that was millions of years old. I am Commander Veltara, she called out, her voice tight with the effort of maintaining control. We are here to test whether your species can coexist with ours without causing harm. Marcus raised his hands peacefully. I have no intention of causing harm, Commander. I am here to learn. just as you are." The words seemed to have an effect on the warriors. Several of them straightened slightly, though Marcus noticed that none of them could maintain their formation when looking directly at him. They kept shifting positions, as if their bodies were trying to find the optimal distance for both attack and retreat simultaneously. "The test begins now," Commander Veltara announced. "You have 24 hours to prove that humans and Veltar can share the same space without conflict." Marcus nodded and then did something that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of taking a defensive position or trying to find cover in the arena, he sat down cross-legged in the center of the space and began to speak in a calm, conversational tone. "Commander, may I ask you about Veltar military training? I am genuinely curious about how your people prepare for combat, when your evolutionary heritage focused on survival rather than aggression." The question seemed to catch the warriors off guard. Commander Veltara hesitated, her weapon still lowered, clearly struggling with the disconnect between Marcus's non-threatening posture and the screaming warnings from her genetic programming. We train to overcome our instincts," she replied, slowly. "To act despite fear." "That must be incredibly difficult," Marcus said with genuine admiration. "On Earth, we have a saying that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. Your people seem to embody that principle perfectly." Something shifted in the commander's stance. The compliment had somehow penetrated through the freeze response, reaching the part of her mind that took pride in her skills and training. She straightened slightly, and Marcus noticed that several other warriors had also adjusted their positions. "You study warrior cultures?" she asked. "I study all cultures," Marcus replied. "But I have always been particularly interested in how different species approach the challenge of overcoming their own limitations. The Veltar military must represent the ultimate expression of conscious will, overriding instinctive programming." For the next hour, Marcus continued this approach. Instead of treating the situation as a survival challenge, he engaged the warriors in conversation about their training, their history, and their techniques. He asked questions that showed genuine respect for their abilities while maintaining a completely non-threatening posture. Gradually, the warriors began to relax. Not completely, their genetic programming was too strong for that, but enough to function despite the freeze response. Marcus noticed that they could maintain eye contact for longer periods and could move more naturally when he was speaking in his calm, conversational tone. "Dr. Chen," Commander Veltara said as the sun reached its zenith, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. When you protected Princess Kira, did you consider the consequences? Did you think about what it might mean for your species or ours?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "No, Commander. I saw a child in danger and I acted. The consequences did not occur to me until much later." "But now that you know the consequences, do you regret your actions?" "Never," Marcus replied, without hesitation. Protecting children is never something to regret, regardless of the complications it might cause. The simple certainty in his voice caused another shift in the warriors' behavior. Several of them actually smiled, a rare expression among their species when in combat formation. "You would do it again," Commander Veltara observed. Every time, as the afternoon wore on, Marcus began to notice something remarkable happening. The warriors were adapting to his presence. They were learning to function despite the freeze response, not by overcoming it entirely, but by working with it. They began to move in patterns that acknowledged their genetic programming while still maintaining tactical effectiveness. By evening, something unprecedented had occurred. The warriors had developed a new form of combat coordination, one that incorporated their freeze response as a tactical element rather than fighting against it. They moved in fluid formations that used their heightened alertness as an advantage, creating a style of combat that was unlike anything in their military history. "Dr. Chen," Commander Veltara said as night fell, "I must tell you something. In all our centuries of military training, we have never achieved this level of coordinated precision. The presence of an apex predator has somehow made us better warriors, not worse ones." Marcus looked around at the warriors, who had formed a protective circle around him without conscious intent. They were functioning as a unit in a way that honored both their evolutionary programming and their trained abilities. "Commander," he said quietly, "I think we may have discovered something that neither of our species expected." "What is that?" "That sometimes the thing you are most afraid of is exactly what you need to become stronger." As the stars appeared overhead, Marcus realized that the test had become something entirely different from what anyone had planned. Instead of proving that humans and Veltar could coexist despite their genetic incompatibility, they had discovered that their incompatibility might actually be their greatest strength when properly understood and channeled. The night was still, young, and there were still hours left in the test, but Marcus already knew that everything was about to change. Not just for him and the Veltar, but for the entire galaxy. The dawn of the second day brought unexpected visitors to the sacred proving grounds. Marcus had spent the night continuing his conversations with the Veltar warriors, and by morning, something extraordinary had happened. The warriors were not just functioning in his presence, they were thriving. Commander Veltara had discovered that her unit could achieve coordination levels that military theorists had claimed were impossible. The constant state of heightened awareness caused by Marcus's presence had created a kind of shared consciousness among the warriors, allowing them to anticipate each other's movements with uncanny precision. "Dr. Chen," the commander said as the first light of dawn touched the arena walls, "we have been warriors all our lives, but we have never been soldiers like this. It is as if your presence has awakened something in us that we never knew existed." Marcus watched as the warriors moved through complex formations that seemed to flow like water. Each movement was precise, purposeful, and coordinated with the others in ways that reminded him of flocking behavior in earthbirds or schooling in fish. "You have become something new," he agreed. "Something that honors both your evolutionary heritage and your trained abilities." The great doors of the arena opened, and Princess Zarathel entered with a delegation of officials from across the galaxy. Behind them came representatives from the Galactic Council, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed fear. And racing ahead of all of them came a small figure that made Marcus's heart lift. "Marcus!" Kira called out, running across the arena floor with the determination of a child who had been separated from her favorite person for far too long. She launched herself into his arms, and he caught her easily, spinning her around as she laughed, with pure joy. The effect on the watching delegates was immediate and profound. Every Veltar in the group froze in place, their genetic programming activating in response to seeing the ultimate predator engaging in protective play behavior with a child. But the warriors who had spent the night with Marcus showed no such reaction. They simply smiled and continued their formations around the reunion. "Impossible," breathed Ambassador Vexhai of the Zephyrian Collective. "How are those warriors still functional?" "Because," Commander Veltara replied, moving to stand beside Marcus with confidence that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. "We have learned something that our species has never known before. We have learned to work with our nature instead of against it." Princess Zarathel approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the warriors who moved with such fluid precision around Marcus and her daughter. "Commander, please explain what has happened here." "Your Highness," the commander said, "Dr. Chen has taught us that being prey species does not make us weak. It makes us aware. It makes us coordinated. It makes us capable of things that predator species cannot achieve because they do not have our evolutionary gifts." High Counselor Mordeth stepped forward, his ancient eyes studying the scene carefully. "You are saying that the human presence has made you stronger warriors, not weaker ones." "Much stronger," another warrior confirmed. "We can fight as one, mind now. We can sense danger before it appears. We can coordinate attacks and defenses with precision that we never achieved in all our centuries of training." Marcus set Kira down, but kept hold of her hand as he addressed the assembled delegates. "What we discovered here is that the relationship between our species is not about dominance or submission. It is about partnership. The Veltar genetic response to humans can be trained and channeled into something beneficial, rather than paralyzing." "Partnership," Ambassador Vexhai repeated skeptically. You mean humans controlling Veltar through their biological weaknesses? No, Kira's clear voice rang out across the arena. The small princess looked up at the ambassador with the fearless directness of childhood. Marcus does not control anyone. He protects, he teaches, he makes everyone feel safe enough to be their best. Her simple words carried more weight than any political argument. The delegates could see the evidence before them. Warriors who moved with unprecedented skill and confidence in the presence of what their biology told them was the ultimate threat. There is more, Commander Veltara announced. Dr. Chen, with your permission, we would like to demonstrate something for the council. Marcus nodded, and the commander gave a series of hand signals that sent her warriors into motion. What followed was the most impressive display of military coordination that anyone in the arena had ever witnessed. The warriors moved through combat formations that seemed to defy the laws of physics, their individual actions flowing together into patterns of breathtaking complexity and effectiveness. But more importantly, they were doing it all while maintaining perfect awareness of Marcus and Kira's position in the center of their formations. They had learned to protect while they fought, to coordinate their movements not just with each other but with the beings they were defending. This is what partnership looks like, Princess Zarathel said quietly. This is what happens when two species stop seeing each other as predator and prey and start seeing each other as complementary. The demonstration continued for an hour, with the warriors showing capability after capability that had never existed in Veltar military history. When they finally came to rest in a perfect defensive formation around Marcus and Kira, the silence in the arena was profound. High Counselor Mordeth was the first to speak. Dr. Chen, what you have accomplished here changes everything we thought we knew about interspecies relationships. You have taken what appeared to be an insurmountable biological incompatibility and transformed it into the foundation for unprecedented cooperation. It was not just me, Marcus replied. The Veltar warriors did the hard work of adapting and learning. I simply provided a different perspective on what their reactions might mean. Ambassador Vexhai looked around the arena with new understanding. The implications go far beyond military applications. If humans can help other species unlock hidden potential through managed biological responses, the possibilities are limitless. Which brings us to the Council's decision, High Counselor Mordeth announced. Based on what we have witnessed here, humanity will not only remain in the Galactic Council, but will be offered a new role entirely. Marcus felt Kira squeeze his hand excitedly. What kind of role? Humanity will become the first symbiotic partner species in Council history, the High Counselor explained. Rather than being just another member species, humans will be paired with species that show complementary biological or psychological traits. The goal will be to help each species achieve capabilities that neither could reach alone. Princess? Zarathel smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression Marcus had seen from her since the crisis began. The Veltar Parliament has already voted unanimously to request humanity as our permanent symbiotic partners. We want to explore what our species can accomplish together. And I, Commander Veltara added, have been authorized to request that Dr. Chen accept the position of first human Veltar military liaison. We have much to learn from each other. Marcus looked down at Kira, who was practically bouncing with excitement. What do you think, little princess? Should I stay and help your people learn new things? Yes, she declared with absolute certainty. And I want to be your apprentice. I want to learn how to think like a predator so I can protect people too. The laughter that rippled through the arena was warm and genuine. In the space of a week, what had begun as a political crisis had transformed into the foundation for an entirely new form of interspecies cooperation. As the delegates began making plans for humanity's new role in galactic society, Marcus realized that sometimes the greatest discoveries came from the simplest acts. He had seen a child in danger and acted to protect her. Everything else had flowed from that one moment of instinctive compassion. Marcus, Kira said, tugging on his hand, when we are partners, does that mean you will teach other species how to be brave too? Marcus looked out at the gathered representatives, seeing curiosity and hope beginning to replace the fear and suspicion that had dominated galactic politics for the past week. I think, little one, that we are going to teach each other all kinds of new things. The sacred proving grounds had witnessed the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history, a true partnership between species that honored both their strengths and their limitations. And at the center of it all stood a human scientist and an alien princess, proving that sometimes the greatest bridges are built not through grand gestures but through simple acts of kindness between unlikely friends.